Hello, my darlings! Welcome back to me reading fanfiction. This is a slightly different video because I'm gonna do one episode. So this is it. Of this seemingly short. It's pretty short. This short fanfiction titled "Flower Boy," by the Cried Prince. I'm saying that wrong. I read this a few nights ago, and it's pretty short. It's 6 parts, but it's actually only 4 chapters. The first and last part are author's notes, so it's only 4 chapters, and it's about 40 minutes long, although I'm probably going to take a lot longer to read that because I'm not a computer. But I read this, and I literally absolutely fell in love with it, and I know Xader's my thing. But in my heart, Kiluga's, like, everything to me, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm absolutely in love with Hunter x Hunter and Kilugan and all of this stuff. So I saw this fanfiction and I read it and I absolutely fell in love with it. And since it's so short, and because, you know, reading fanfiction is what I do, I went, why don't I just like reread this? So this is the first time ever I'm reading a fanfiction to y'all that I've already read. And hopefully it records fine because this is gonna be one long ass recording. But anyways, so it's on Wattpad. And the description is literally, Gonfrex is new in town, Kilozordic is his mute neighbor. That's all that it is, and that's, you know, that's what it's about. But I have a lot to say about this, and I'll save it for the very end if you're curious, because, you know, I feel a lot of things for it. So I'll just get to reading, and if you can hear that I'm smiling, I am smiling so hard because I absolutely love this. This isn't the first time I'm falling in love with a fanfiction or anything, but this is the first time I'm reading one to you that I've already loved, that I already know. Actually, that's a lie. My Septifier fanfiction one that I read a long time ago that I stopped because it was a little, oh my god, you know what I'm saying? I really liked that one at the time. Now looking back at it, you know, that was a part of me. That was a part of who I used to be, you know. But right now, at this moment, I love this. I literally read it for the first time like 3 nights ago, and I'm so excited to share this with y'all. So, get cozy, get nice and comfortable for this long video, and allow me to take you on this Kilugan Flower Boy journey. Chapter 1: Daisies. There's just something about flowers that brings the world to life. I like to think there's something beautiful amidst the ugliness in the world. All the different colors stark against the vastness of the universe that is its easel. The way petals feel, the way they're shaped, all the different kinds, it puts me in awe. Flowers were just something extraordinary, whether they be found randomly on a hill or given as a gift. Their beauty didn't become any less. Like the daisies along the side of the road, little patches every few miles Aunt Mito drove, and I'd press my face against the window of the car to catch a glimpse of them. It wasn't until we reached the hillsides that I'd pull away, my eyes widening as I saw how covered those hills were. Daisies as far as the eye could see, among the thick tresses of long green grass. This was the beauty of the countryside, the nature almost always untouched. Look, Gon, that's the school you'll be attending. Mito-san pointed towards the side, her eyes never leaving the road as I pulled my face away from the cool glass of the car window just in time to catch a glimpse of the high school I'd be attending come next week. It's okay, I mused with reluctance. Sure, I didn't mind moving so much, but the new school, that was another story entirely. I just wasn't a fan of school. After finishing off my junior years on a bad note. It'll be different this year, sweet boy. I know it will. I admire my Aunt Mito's will to ease me into the idea, but I just wasn't having it. Propping my chin to the palm of my hand, I resumed my observations of my new home and all it had to offer. It wasn't long until I caught sight of our new house, just yonder over a small hill. We had a few neighbors who I haven't met yet, but I know the one next door, as Mito-san explained to me, had quite the garden separating our houses. complete with a white picket fence. Only reason I hadn't seen our new home was due to the fact that I had summer school and stayed behind with a friend of Mito-san's while her and my grandmother inspected the place. This had made my mood a little sour, as I recalled, upset that I was the only one that hadn't seen where we would be living. Like, my opinion didn't matter. Not that I complained. I didn't have any friends at our old town. I, gone freaks, was an outcast. Labeled too strange to even approach, though I do remember once that someone did on a dare. A girl, and she had asked me on a date as a pure joke. The humiliation lasted for weeks because I didn't know it was a dare until that same afternoon, and I realized the girl stood me up. Sighing, I leaned back in my seat. This was a chance to start anew, to begin fresh. No one knew me here, and I had practiced to keep my strangeness to a minimum. Though Aunt Mito had reprimanded me when I told her, saying people who don't love the real me don't deserve my friendship. She just didn't understand that the real me was the problem. I wanted to change for the better. "We're here!" Aunt Mito's voice drifted to the back seat, and I looked up to see a small, cozy, country-style home in front of us, painted a green turquoise. It was pleasant on the eyes, and I found myself grinning as I unbuckled my seat, my earlier morose thoughts already forgotten. "Is this really it?" I asked, stepping up, my eyes scanning every inch of the place. There was a wind chime twinkling from the slight breeze, potted plants and flowers along the bottom of the house, perfectly lined with another. The front steps looked like they had just been freshly painted, and I was almost too afraid to step on them for fear of scuffing them with my sneakers. "So what do you think?" Looking up, I saw Mito-san peering at me in concern, as if she expected me to say I hated it. "I love it!" I gushed truthfully, and she beamed. "I told you that he would." My grandmother's voice cut in for the first time in a few hours, since she had been asleep the entire ride over here. Leaving them, I walk around the side of the house, admiring all the different plants and flowers that brought the yard to life. Especially the daisies. I love daisies. Mostly because Mito-san always used to sing me a song about them when I was little, to help me sleep. Fondly, I kneeled down to pick one, twirling it between my fingers as I stood up, the gentle wind blowing against my face. We had acres of land, about 5 if I remember correctly, a white picket fence separating our part from our neighbors, and as my eyes scanned the place, I saw we had horse stables along the side, and I was beside myself. I've always wanted a horse. Maybe Mito-san would finally let me have one. I walked further into the yard, the grass to my knees, until I reached the part of the fence that separated the back of the yard from the horse's pasture. I admired it with a smile curled up on my lips, climbing atop the fence till I was able to lean over it, my feet on the bottom railing. There was no doubt in my mind that I would love it here. School was just the issue, and I could only hope things would turn out to be different here. Swinging my legs over the fence until I was able to sit down on it, I looked out into the distance, the houses of the neighbors far off. The quiet was one thing I was used to, being born a country boy from the start. Snapping a picture on my phone, I didn't realize that someone was watching me until I jumped off the fence and caught sight of a pair of eyes peering from behind a tree. Having been caught, the owner of the eyes fearfully shielded themselves behind the trunk. The only thing visible now to my eyes was the tuft of his fluffy white hair that poked out. Smiling, I landed on my feet and ambled over to the tree that was between our 2 fences. "Hey," I spoke softly, and was happy to see an eye make an appearance. That's when I noticed the color. A deep blue, like a sapphire, bringing out his entire appearance. As I saw, his skin was pale white and porcelain-looking. "Why don't you come out?" A shake of the head was given, and he hid himself behind the tree again. At least, I assumed it was a boy, despite his feminine appearance. That eye was enough to tell me that, and also that he was pretty. I was immediately enchanted by this boy. "I won't hurt you," I continued, smiling effortlessly as I take a step closer. "I promise." Hesitantly, The boy peeks his whole head out, giving me a good view of his entire face, and my breath hitched. I was right. He was fascinatingly pretty. His eyes practically sparkled in the falling sun. When he stepped out from the cover of the tree, I saw his fluffy white hair in all of its glory, messy and falling over his pretty blue eyes. He was wearing an oversized pasty yellow sweater that fell from his shoulders slightly, giving me a view of his bony shoulder blades. The sleeves baggy, falling from his skinny arms. In one hand, he clutched a bundle of daisies, which he held from the front of his face so only his eyes were peering at me shyly. His shorts fell above his knobby, scratched-up knees, and I saw for the first time that he was barefoot, his pale feet dirt-ridden. And in all, he was utterly beautiful. "What's your name?" And I realized I was out of breath, probably due to the fact that I had unknowingly held it on my intense scrutiny of the boy before me. The boy didn't speak. He just backed away, his small hand clutching his daisies tightly, as if he was second-guessing his decision on revealing himself to me. "Don't be afraid," I cried out desperately, not wanting to ruin my chance of making my first friend. But my loud voice only succeeded in frightening him further and retreated back behind the tree. "I'm sorry," I lowered my voice. "It's just, I don't know how to make friends, you know?" Half his face peeks out at me. Everyone back at my old home found me weird and refused to talk to me. They even made fun of me. Can you believe that? The boy looked like he was pondering my words for a minute before he shook his head, stepping out from behind the tree again. Although he didn't stay far from it, the branches shading his face. This urged me to continue, glad he didn't run away. I took his quietness as a sign of his extreme shyness. "I didn't mean to yell," I grinned sheepishly, my tongue poking out from my mouth as I rubbed the back of my head. "I just wanted to talk to you." His gaze saddened and I feared I said something wrong, so I quickly backpedaled so I could try to fix it. "I mean, do you want to be friends?" The boy looked down at his dirt-stained feet, toes wiggling in the grass as he thought over what I said. The span of silence that spreaded was enough to make me nervous, and I pulled at the collar of my shirt anxiously before he looked up and nodded, the hint of a smile forming on his pale lips. "Really? Great!" I pumped a fist into the air in pure joy, and he nodded again, so vigorously I thought his head would come flying off. He looked so delicate and frail after all. Really thin, making me wonder if he got enough to eat. I was just about to ask him if he was hungry, and even compliment the daisies he held, before Mito-san's voice sounded from the front of the house. "Gone? Gone! Where are you? The moving truck's here! Come pick out your room and see inside the house!" My room! I had almost forgotten I haven't explored the inside of the house yet. I yelled back, "I'm coming!" I turned back to face the boy, but he was gone. Chapter 2. Sunflowers. I was quick to learn the mysteries of the boy next door. His name was Killua. He was 14, like me, except he didn't go to school. He was so frail and sickly that his parents forbade him from straying away from the yard. And he was mute. I learned this the night of the day we met. He sat cross-legged at his bedroom window, waving to me to catch my attention. I immediately scrambled onto my mattress that the movers had placed by my window, and waved back at him, grin on my face. How lucky was it that his room was just across from mine? He pulls what looked like a notepad onto his lap and starts scribbling something on it before holding up against the window so I could see. I'm mute. I look slightly perplexed, and seeing my look of confusion, he pulls the notepad back and turns the page to scribble something else, before showing me in the same process once more. It means I can't talk. That's when everything clicked, and I finally understood why he didn't talk to me earlier. Because he couldn't. My heart immediately weighed heavy in my chest, and I took this information in. Not only was he so frail looking, he couldn't even talk. I felt angry, and I couldn't fathom why. These were things that just happened, as unfamiliar as it was. I felt a wave of overprotectiveness wash over me. I had to protect this boy. That was the thought that embedded itself into my consciousness. No matter what I do, I would protect him. The following week arrived, and that meant school. The days that had led up to it, I had used to get to know more about Killua. Daisies were his favorite flower, and cats were his favorite animal. When I told him I would be getting a kitten soon, he was beside himself with glee, mouth wide open in slight laughter. It was honestly the cutest thing I ever saw. The way his small body shook as he doubled over, although the laugh was silent. I bet if he could really laugh, it would be the most beautiful sound in the world. I didn't understand my complete fascination with the boy at first, other than the fact that I thought he was so pretty and mysterious. It soon became clear as to why. Despite his handicap, he was the sweetest thing. The morning after I moved in, Mito-san called up the stairs, announcing that I had a friend over. Confusion laced in her voice, probably wondering how I made a friend so fast and not telling her about it. Excitement surging through my body, I jumped off my bed and bounded toward the stairs. There, at the bottom, by the front door, stood Killua, in an oversized gray sweatshirt and coffee brown shorts with flip-flops on his dirt-smudged feet. He looked small and out of place in my living room, a frightened look in his eyes. Clutching in his small hands were a bundle of flowers. Killua! As much as I wanted to cry his name in utter joy, I used my inside voice. I didn't want to frighten him off, after all. He already looked scared enough standing by Aunt Mito. A look of relief flickers across his beautiful blue eyes as he holds out his bunch of sunflowers at me, and I blink in surprise, taking them. "Are these for me?" I ask, and he nods, a pink flush rising onto his porcelain-pale cheeks. "Aren't you delightful?" Mito-san gushes, and Killua startles off, as if he had forgotten she was in the room. He scampers behind me and hides his face, pressing into my back. Did I say something? Amito looked worried. "He's just Sai, Mito-san," I explained to my wayward aunt, although I was beyond delighted that he had opened up to me so quickly. Plus, I lowered my voice into a whisper, "He's mute." A look of understanding crosses Mito-san's gaze, and she nodded. "Oh, I see. I'm sorry, dear." Although she hadn't outwardly said or done anything to offend him in that aspect, my aunt still chose to apologize. Killua stuck his head out from behind my back and looks at her before lifting his gaze to meet mine, and I smile at him warmly, encouraging him. His gaze flickers back to train on her, and he nodded. "He says it's okay, Mito-san," I chirp, and Killua withdrew his hand quickly, back behind my back. "We should probably put the flowers in water, sweet boy." Mito-san took my sunflowers from me and offered us a smile before disappearing into the kitchen. "We're gonna play outside," I called out to her as I grabbed Killua's dangly wrist and gently tugged him outside into the yard. It was a beautiful morning, with the sun already hanging over us in the sky. "I can't wait to get animals," I explained to Killua, as I helped him climb beneath the fence of the horse pasture so we could take a closer look at the stables. Mito-san says I can get a few. Killua blinks his blue eyes questionably at me, so I explain further. I'm getting a horse, a kitten, and a puppy. I was excited. And Mito-san and my great-grandmother getting chickens, cows, and goats for milk, eggs, and cheese, stuff like that. I might get a lamb, too. Killua's sapphire blue eyes sparkled, and I was immediately silenced by the sight of them. They were addicting. Hypnotic, almost. I found I couldn't tear my gaze away from them, until he caught me staring at him, and I would look away bashfully, heat rising to my cheeks. "Will you keep coming over?" I asked, hoping this wasn't a one-time thing. Killua nodded vigorously, and I grinned. Mito-san brought us lunch a while later, and me and Killua had a picnic in the front lawn. We had sandwiches, crackers with cheese, and juice boxes. Killua seemed overly delighted, and I wonder if he's ever done things like this before. From the looks of it, I guess not. I was just happy he was eating. Lord knows he needs food in that scrawny, frail body of his. Every once in a while, I noticed the curtains in one of the windows on his house shift, and I looked up to see a pale face, with dark, menacing eyes staring out at us. It sent inward shudders throughout my entire body. Killua, who's that? I pointed to the window as the curtains close. Killua turns just in time to see this and makes a face. He brought out his notepad and scribbled something onto it before handing it to me. That's my oldest brother, Illumni. Brother? I swore I caught a slight of black hair. How many siblings do you have? Killua proceeds to scribble beneath what he wrote already, and I read it as best I could, upside down. 2 older brothers, 1 younger brother, and 1 younger sister? He nodded. Killua looked so young and frail. I'd expected him to be the youngest. Are you the only one who can't speak? I hope I didn't sound insensitive. He nodded, a sad look clouding his gaze. I must protect him, I thought ferociously. When Monday morning of my first day at school came around, I was nervous to say the least. Plus, I'd be away from Killua. I'll be back soon, I reassured him when he came out to see me off. He nodded, toes wiggling into the grass, and I smiled despite myself. With a wave, I walked off to head for the bus stop. Upon exiting our acreage, I saw a few of the other teens and kids leaving their houses too, and my hands tightened around the straps of my backpack. This was it, my new start. I could only hope things would be different here. As my anxiety rose, sunflowers filled my thoughts and I smiled. I was no longer anxious when the bus arrived, and I was the first one on, situating myself in the back, where I was joined by a girl with long blonde curly hair that bounced on her shoulders as she took her seat. The school was bigger than I thought when we arrived, looming over me as I made my way towards the front doors. Students mingled about in groups, talking and laughing together after being away for the summer. With nothing better to do, I found my locker and familiarized myself with the combination and with the rest of the school. I found the blonde girl who had sat next to me on the bus with a girl of blue hair that was tied back into a ponytail. Upon spotting me, the blonde girl pointed me out to her friend, and they both looked at me and giggled. An instant flashback to the time I stood up came to mind, and I looked away, hurrying on with my head bowed. I won't go through that again. The shrill sound of the bell sounding not long after, and the hallways were soon packed with students heading towards their homeroom. Clutching my schedule tightly in my hand, I pushed through the crowd, towards where I saw my homeroom earlier, and managed to get there in one piece. Slightly disgruntled, but at least I had all my limbs. I entered the class and saw a girl with a blonde ponytail standing behind the teacher's desk. A light blue t-shirt on with small pockets on the left hand of the corner read Bisky in white letters. I assumed she was the teacher's assistant. Hi, she greeted me with a small smile, and I nodded in her direction. You must be new here. How did you know? I asked, since it was the first day of school for everybody. Wouldn't it be hard to single out somebody who had just moved to this town? Because I've never seen you before, she pointed out. I'm Biscuit Kruger, your physical ed and your health teacher. You can call me Bisky. No way. She's a teacher? I blink in surprise. But you look so young, I exclaim, unable to help myself. Students entering the class snickered in amusement and I flushed. She didn't look offended, though her smile was mischievous. I get at that a lot. Now, why don't you take your seat, Gon? Of course she would know my name too. I quickly scurried to my seat, choosing the one up front that was smack dab in the middle, seeing as most of the middle of the room and back were taken, thanks to my conversation with the teacher. When Bisky started roll call, I found myself drifting, Killua coming to my mind, and I wistfully wished he could be here, with sunflowers in his small hand and a smile on his face to match. Chapter 3. Cherry Blossoms. Months later. I wake up to the sunlight peeking through my curtains, bathing my bed in a yellow glow that reaches my face. A soft breeze blows and something tickles my nose. Sheepily, I open my eyes and find a petal settling itself on it. A pink one, to be exact. Sitting up, I find my bed and room filled with cherry blossoms. It was cherry blossom season. My face lit up with delight as I leaped up and crawled over to my window. Next door, I saw Killua doing the same. Fluffy white hair blowing in the breeze as he poked his head through his window. The sunlight bathed his face, giving his skin an ethereal shine that caused me to lose my train of thought and breath. He watched the cherry blossoms fill the air and ground beneath with bright, exciting eyes before he turned in my direction, positively beaming. His behavior was like that of a small child, delighted at the prospect of something new. And witnessing this sight with my own eyes, I felt incredibly lucky, blessed even, as the past months lazily wandered off throughout my consciousness. Killua was my best friend, and ever since the day we met, we did everything together. Minus school, obviously. To my surprise, I had befriended another, Kurapika, who was a senior in my school, and whom I had one class which happened to be Miss Bisky's class, PE and Health. It was during a vigorous game of kickball. To everyone's surprise, I was the only one left in the circle to be hit. Kurapika had the ball. Until that point, I had dodged every attack he threw at me, and I could tell he was getting frustrated. I had grinned mischievously when Miss Bisky announced that he only had one more chance to hit me before she declared victory to my team, who was cheering me on. The feeling that had surged throughout me at the sound of their chants was foreign to me. Gray eyes blazing with determination, Kurapika threw the ball, and I just narrowly dodged it as it whizzed past my arm. Miss Bisky blew her whistle shrilly. Gon's team wins! Nice game, Kurapika had told me later, in the locker room. I blushed. I remembered clearly, as if it only occurred yesterday rather than months ago. Since then, I wasn't alone at school, and when I met Kurapika's boyfriend, Leorio, I was even happier, although the absence of Killua was strongly felt in every fiber of my being. I didn't tell them about him yet. I wanted to keep his beauty to myself for a while longer. The wave of overprotectiveness washing over me, though the strain and longing I felt was worn on my face, making me an open book of emotions. Yo, Gon, Leorio had spoken up one afternoon during lunch at school as I opened up my bento box. I feigned innocence. What's up? I knew something was amiss as soon as he spoke in that tone, for my mind was on Killua at that brief moment, and I had sighed. You know what's up, Kurapika scoffed, his gaze stern. You daze off a lot, and I want to know why. He could be such a mom sometimes. I twiddled nervously with my fingers. I've been hiding something, or rather, someone, from you both. They look at each other, blinking, before turning back to me. Oh, a smirk plastered itself onto Leorio's face. You have a girlfriend, don't you? I blushed, and Leorio howled when Kurapika elbowed him in the ribs. No! I waved my hands in front of me frantically as I watched the bickering session between Kurapika and Leorio unfold before me. He's my best friend. Their shouting match stopped and they both turned to me, their expressions bewildered. He's very precious to me, and I want to protect him, so... So you kept him a secret. Krupka finished with finality as he sat back in his seat, nodding his head. I get it. Well, I guess I understand that. Lirio had scratches on his head and a mildly disappointed look on his face. Do you want to meet him? I had offered, ready to share my treasure with the world. Well, at least to them two. I'm gonna play outside, Mitsuo-san. I called out on my way down the stairs, slipping my boots on in a rush before sprinting out the door. Killua was already waiting for me. Beneath a cherry blossom tree our yard shared, the pink petals flowing elegantly throughout the air before fluttering onto the ground, the fence, or into our hair. He was barefoot, as he almost always was, pale feet covered in the beautiful flowers as well as his hair. He giggled as one perched itself on his nose, and I marveled at the sight. He's so perfect. Not only that, I could hear Killua's laughs now. They weren't normal laughs, more like squeaks if anything, but I grew to love them, like I loved everything else about him. And because of him, I learned sign language to make it easier on him so he wouldn't have to carry around a notepad and pen all the time. He had really appreciated it and was taken by surprise when I had finished my course and I greeted him in sign language. He even cried tears of joy. His small body had shook with the pressure of them, and I had to hold him close to soothe him. Though he assured me he was okay, he was just really happy. Making him happy was my priority. I wasn't sure what kind of life he lived with his family, but it must be hard on him not knowing how to speak, to voice what he wants. My overprotectiveness of him only grew more ferociously when he had told me of his brother Illumni could be manipulative. It pained me to think of the things that he probably got Killua to do or believe. Though Killua always looked happy, but being who I am, I knew perfectly well what a smile could hide. As much as I wanted to talk to him about it, ask him questions, I didn't. Instead, I focused solely on making him happy, to retain his smile, like something that must be preserved. Because it honestly did, forever. Hey Killua, I chirp, as we sat on the fence surrounding my horse's paddock, watching as my horse trotted around and catching cherry blossoms with our hands. Do you think you could sleep over today? I invited Krupka and Leorio over, and I want you to be there too. He turns to me, sapphire blue eyes alight with a happiness as he nods so vigorously, I was afraid his head would come flying off. At least he wasn't as skinny as before, though. I made sure of that. And his skin wasn't so ghostly pale anymore. It now had a pinkish, healthy tint to it, making him glow when the sun was on him at the perfect angle. It always made him look like some ethereal being. To me, he was. He was the epitome of something beautiful. Great! My grin spreads across my face ear to ear. They'll be here any minute now. Killua nodded again, tugging my shirt and pointed towards his house. You want to get your stuff? Another nod. Tug, tug. Then I understood. He wanted me to go with him. Okay. I beamed at him. Let's go. In the few months I have known Killua, not once have I ever stepped foot into his house. Every time I asked, he dodged the question and tugged me in the opposite direction. So being in his room was absolutely foreign to me. I didn't know what to expect. It was exceptionally neat and tidy, unlike mine. He had one dresser with books lined up along the top, as well as some figures. A small TV perched in one corner on the nightstand, and with his bed situated directly in front of it. A desk was on the other side of the corner of the room, with a lamp and sketchbook in the middle, with pencils next to it. Curious, I ambled over to it while Killua dug into his closet. The drawings inside were stunning. The paper was parchment, and it felt nice against my calloused fingers, rough after all the years I spent outdoors. All he drew were flowers, but he depicted them exactly how they were in real life. His latest one, from what I assume, was of sunflowers, and seeing the bright yellow flower on the page curled my lips onto a smile. He's my flower boy. A tap on my shoulder causes me to jump, and I turn. Killua now held a bag over his shoulder. He was bouncing on his toes in excitement. Who was I to keep him waiting? I held out my hand with a smile, and he grins, taking it into his own, and our fingers interlace. This gesture causes my heart to thump incredibly fast, and I couldn't fathom why. As we headed down the stairs of his house, I pondered all the possibilities of why. We've held hands before, so why is this so different? I wasn't sure, but every time we did, I felt like I was older than him by a few years, rather than a few months. He was so small and fragile. It was an easy feeling to inscribe itself on me. Maybe because I like him? Like him. But I was quick to throw that option out the window. He was my best friend, after all. The one I cherished above all else and swore to protect. Killua. A hard, cold voice cuts into my thoughts, and I turn my head as we reached the front door. There, at the entrance to the kitchen, stood Illumni, sleek black hair tossed over his shoulders so it hung down his back. His eyes were dark and deep, like an abyss waiting to swallow me whole. Killua furrowed his brow, a sign I've come to know that indicated he was upset. He turns his face away, but I don't, making me catch sight of Illumni staring at our held hands with a face void of any emotion. I shivered. "Where are you taking him?" he asked with a tilt of his head, noting the bag slung over Killua's shoulder. But Killua cuts me off, signing ferociously to Illumni that I could only blink rapidly, trying to follow his quick fingers. Before I could, Killua opens the door and tugs me out. "Your brother is scary," I commented once we were in the safety of my room. He nods his head as he drops his bags by my bed. That's when I face-palmed myself. "Are you sure it's alright if you stay over?" I asked quickly. The thought of needing his parents' permission never crossed my mind. He nodded again as he perched himself politely at the end of my bed. "Go on," my Aunt Mito shouts up the stairs. "Krupka and the Oreo are here." "Send them up," I shout back, and soon I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Killua hops off the bed just as Krupka and the Oreo enter through my bedroom door. "Oh, Killua's here already." Krupka smiles gently at him, while the Oreo ruffles his hair. "Hey, Killua," he bellowed, loud as always. Killua just rolled his eyes and giggled. I was happy he was so used to them both. He signs to me that he was going to use the bathroom, and I nodded, while the Oreo and Krupka made themselves comfy in my room. I wasn't aware I had been staring out at the door where Killua left, until Krupka cleared his throat. "Earth gone. Are you there?" His hand waved in front of my face, and I am seemingly pulled back to reality. Yeah? What?" I blink, rubbing the back of my head sheepishly. "You were staring at Killua until he disappeared, and you didn't regain your focus when he left." Krupka quirks up an elbow curiously. "Oh, I frantically searched in my mind for an excuse. I was just... "You like him, don't you?" I froze. Like Killua? This was exactly the same thing I asked myself earlier. I stammer, avoiding looking at them both. But it became clear as day to me. My thumping heart, the way I cherished him, how I thought he was the most beautiful boy I've ever seen. I liked Killua. Maybe I was even in love with him. Chapter 4. Roses. When Killua came back from the bathroom, I couldn't even meet his eyes, causing his brow to crease with worry. Krupka nudges me hard in the ribs. "Ow!" I winced, and he shot me a look that said, Your feelings are written all over your face, idiot. Well, gosh, I huff. Not my fault. Killua tugs on my shirt and I turn to face him, finding a pout forming on his pale lips. Crap. He's so cute. I blush. Another hard nudge, this time in my back. I jolt. Sorry, Killua. I was just thinking about your brother. Good save. I just don't want you to get into any trouble because of me. Killua waved his hand in dismissal, climbing on top of my bed and pointing at the TV. I laugh. Alright. We'll put a movie on. Help me make the popcorn and snacks, Lario. Krupka, pick a movie and put it on. Despite my older friend's complaints, I tug him down the stairs and into the kitchen. Stop complaining, I hiss. I wanted to pick a movie though, Lario complained, and I rolled my eyes. For someone 3 years older than me, he was pretty childish. You can pick the next one. I start digging throughout the cupboards for a big bowl to put the popcorn in. Find the popcorn and make it. By the time we were done and headed up the stairs, we had a big bowl of popcorn, a plate full of s'mores, a bag of chips, and a carton of sodas. This was my first sleepover, so I wanted to go all out. Special delivery, I chirped as I pushed my bedroom door open with my foot. At the sight of all the snacks, Killua's eyes sparkled while Krupka's widened in shock. We're eating all of that? He exclaims. You're begging for cavities. I don't get cavities. A widened smile stretched across my face from ear to ear, revealing my perfectly aligned white teeth. He just rolled his eyes and caught the soda Lario tossed at him before settling down one of the beanbag chairs in my room. The movie Jurassic World was on, and was on the main menu of the screen of my TV. Killua helped me pick it out. Krupka explained before I could even ask. Killua beamed at me, and I couldn't help but to smile lovingly at him, as I climbed up onto my bed and sat cross-legged next to him, a bowl of popcorn and a plate of s'mores in front of us. Lario was hogging the chips, not that I minded, because the entirety of my focus was on Killua, the way the small dimples indented into his cheeks whenever his smile grew too wide, the way his tiny freckles sprinkled on his nose became more prominent when he wrinkled his nose cutely. It simply took my breath away. Gone? Krupka's voice snaps me back to the present. Yeah? I asked you if you're ready for me to push play. He frowned. Oh yeah, totally. Krupka kept frowning at me suspiciously before turning around to start the movie. I let out a sigh. I knew this would be brought up again later. But for the meantime, I tried focusing on the movie, because as soon as it started, Killua clutches my arms, blue eyes wide as they fixate onto the screen. I couldn't suppress my smile at that. He really was like a child, despite being 14 years old. He was much like me in that aspect. That's what Mito-san loves about me, that I didn't grow up too fast or too slow. It's no fun being completely grown up. You like it already so far, don't you? I chuckled at Killua as he nodded. Every now and then, I felt Krupka's eyes on me, although I chose to ignore it. But as the movie went on, the staring became constant and I finally met Krupka's glaze and glared at him. What? I hissed between my teeth quietly so Killua wouldn't hear. Krupka gestures to my bedroom door as if he wanted to talk away from the prying ears of Lario and Killua. I really didn't want to miss the movie, and I crossed my arms in defiance, akin to a child throwing a tantrum. Krupka hisses and strode upwards, taking hold of my wrist tightly, forcing me off the bed as I whined in protest. Krupka, we'll miss the movie! I glanced over my shoulder to find Killua staring at my fleeting figure with surly blue eyes widened with concern. I'll be back, I promised, just before Krupka shut the door. Lario's baffled expression cut from my view. Explain. Krupka wasted no time with his interrogation, gray eyes practically blazing with authority. It's not even that serious, I huff, turning away, my cheeks glowing warm. Sweat began to trickle across my brow, and I pull at the collar of my shirt nervously. You really like Killua, don't you? His voice was a mere whisper now, quiet, so it wouldn't travel through the closed door of my bedroom. I sigh. Talk about having good intuition. He really was like a mom. Yes, I mumble, my toe thumping on the wooden floor gently, as I found the need to do something to keep from growing too anxious. But it'll never happen. Why not? Krupka looked quizzical, genuinely not understanding the situation I found myself in. He's too pure for me, Pika. And you're not pure? He raises an eyebrow at me. I blush heavily, and my hands frankly wave in front of me. Wait, that's not what I meant. It's just, you've seen him. He's so delicate and innocent. I don't want to taint him. I look away. Wow, this conversation suddenly got deep. I love him too much to do that. A span of silence fills the hall, and I began to feel dreaded, as it seeps into my body slowly, like a stream of emotions. Finally, after what felt like I would drown in my sorrow, my past rejections and pain, Krupka spoke up, his voice gentle and full of love. Hey, Gon, you know Killua loves you back, right? My fists clench. Of course I do. It's just not in the same way that I do. And how do you know that? I scoff. Come on, Krupka. Do you seriously think he even knows what love is? Just because we're the same age doesn't mean he's that far off yet. He's like a child. Or he might be smarter than what you're giving him credit for. I become quiet, averting my gaze from my taller friend as I leaned back against the wall. I just don't want to lose him if things go wrong, Pika. My voice becomes soft, laced with frustration and practically pleading. Pleading him not to tell Killua or Leorio. These feelings I had needed to keep buried in my heart as much as it hurt. There was no point talking about it any longer. They're probably wondering what happened to us, I mumbled, headed for the door. Just forget about it, okay? Krupka doesn't respond as I head inside, back to my room, back to my bed, and back to Killua. It was almost midnight by the time we finished watching the movies and playing video games. Killua had tried forcing himself to stay awake, but his eyes kept closing and his head drooped every once in a while, until he finally caved and his head rolled to the side onto my shoulder, while I was in the middle of Super Smash Bros. With Leorio. This little scene didn't go unnoticed by Krupka, his gray eyes piercing into my body, leaving me to shiver inwardly, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. What are you looking at? I finally hiss under my breath so I didn't wake Killua, who shifted slightly, pressing himself closer into my side. You know what? He said coolly, before my eyes. I roll my eyes and fixate them back onto the game. Thankfully, Leorio was too into it that he didn't notice the tension that had filled the room. It wasn't until about an hour later, Leorio fell asleep and all that was left with me and Krupka. I adjusted Killua carefully beneath a blanket, tucking him in, fully aware that Krupka was watching my every move. I'm going to bed, I announced, sounding rather weary. I pulled the blanket over me and I turned my back towards him, feeling his eyes on me a little while longer, until I heard him lie down on his makeshift bed and shift around until he got comfortable. I don't know how long I lied there, in the dark and quiet that had spanned across my room, giving a rather forlorn feeling to the atmosphere, much like the current emotions that were stirring like crazy within me. Could I really keep these feelings pent up forever? Just the thought of that sounded exhausting and painful. I didn't want to have to go through that. I wanted to be selfish. I wanted to confess to Killua and ask him to be my soulmate, so to speak. I wanted to whisk him away from his family and into a field of flowers, where we could twirl around in the stems and the petals, with cherry blossoms wafting around us, their enticing scent filling our nostrils. As childish as that sounded, and as selfish as it made me, I wanted it to happen with every fiber of my being. My heart was beginning to ache, and I clutched at my chest. Is this what forbidden love feels like? Or did all love feel this way? It seemed that way in the movies. Love was just painful in general, I guess, so why did so many people want it? Because despite the heartache it brings, it's also the most beautiful feeling in the world, was the single thought to pass through my sleepy conscience. Both feelings entailed sacrifice from both parties. Yet, when the feeling is mutual, then there's no words that could really describe every emotion, every thought, every bit of happiness that one could feel with that knowledge. Mito-san had never been married, as far as I know, nor had she ever been in love. I was her priority, and guilt formed at the pit of my belly at the notion. Everyone had the right to feel love at least once in their lifetime. Turning onto my side, face resting on my arm, as my eyes found Killua's sleeping figure in the near darkness of my room, the only light coming from the full moon outside. Hanging in the midnight expanse, that was the sky. His chest moved up and down slowly, in a rhythm to his breathing, and I found myself losing breath at such a sight. He was like a sleeping angel, so pure and innocent. The thought of my image destroying that was too much for me to bear. In what lifetime did I even deserve to think of him in that way? You don't deserve him, Gon. My conscience lashed at me, seemingly awake now. I quickly dismiss it. I just needed to confess my feelings, relieve the painful situation that was practically stealing me of breath. That's all that I wanted. With this resolve embedded into my mind, I turn over to my back once more, letting my eyes shut tightly, and ideas forming into my thoughts just before I drift. I was up at the crack of dawn, just before the sun woke up. Quietly, I sit up, taking a quick glance around my room to find the other three still sleeping. Careful not to make any noise, I shift under my bed and tiptoe towards my bedroom door, where I exited before quietly shutting the door behind me. Now for my plan. Barefoot, I make my way upwards towards the porch, stepping out to the dawn of the day, the sun barely starting to peek through the clouds. I take a deep breath, a smile forming across my face as I turn my face upwards with closed eyes. I now knew what it felt like to be in love, and it was glorious. Even though I knew it wasn't mutual, the thought itself, the feeling itself, was indescribable. I felt light, as if I was being uplifted into the clouds with a million butterflies flapping around in my belly. I loved the most beautiful boy in the world, and whether he returned my feelings or not, he deserved everything. With this thought, I make my way down off the porch to the garden where Mito-san grew her roses. She had all various colors, from pink to yellow, from white to red. They were beautiful. I run my calloused fingers over the soft petals, loving how they soothed my skin, that grew flesh from the morning cold. I was going to pick some for Killua. If Mito-san got mad, then I would do a buttload of chores to make up for what I had to do. One of my kittens ambles by, rubbing up against my leg as I got to work, causing me to pause in order to smile as I reached down to pet him, before resuming my work, humming, leaving my lips. I stayed on alert in case I was caught in my plan, praying I won't be. My eyes would gaze over my shoulder every now and then, making the task seem longer than it really was. By the time I finished, I had a bouquet of 12 roses, which I had brought to the countertop in the kitchen to carefully trim the bottoms. Next, I dug through my grandmother's sewing supplies and found a blue ribbon. Perfect. I used that to tie the bouquet together, the finishing touch. I contemplated my plan over and over. As I sat on a stool at the counter, what would Killua's reaction be like? It would be so much easier if he could talk, but I quickly pushed that thought away. I loved Killua the way he was. I wouldn't change him for anything. The creak of the stairs alerted me that someone was coming down, and I was quick to whisk up my bouquet and dash outside. This confession had to be perfect, and I knew just where to do it. No sooner had I settled myself beneath the tree where I first encountered Killua, a voice calls out to my name quietly. Gone? I quickly realized it was Kurapika, who had come down the stairs. I stiffened. I was ready to confess, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to face him after yesterday. Kurapika, I say in a rather strained voice. I was expecting someone else. That someone being Killua? The hand holding my roses clenched around the stems. I decided to confess. Kurapika crossed his arms. It's about time you stopped being stubborn. Shut up, I whine, just as more footsteps could be heard. Gone? Kurapika? Lirio yawned with a stretch, Killua beside him, looking at me with wide eyes. I blush. What are you doing up so early? Gon has something important to do. Kurapika immediately heads over to Lirio, grabbing his hand, and began tugging him back towards the kitchen. Wait! Kurapika, we're... Lirio protests, though those soon faded once they were both inside my house. I was now alone with Killua. I shifted nervously from foot to foot, my bare toes tangling into the tresses of the grass. Killua stood quietly, patiently, his eyes never leaving me. Killua, I swallow, my hands beginning to shake, and I will myself to bringing the bouquet up to my chest. I have something important to say, but I'm scared, so scared that you'll hate me for it. Killua tilts his head, and he raises his hands, signing that he could never hate me. I suppress the tears that were beginning to sting in the back of my eyes and continue. Ever since I first met you, Killua, I was immediately enchanted by you. I thought you were the most beautiful person I had ever met. A bright pink adorns Killua's pale cheeks. And that's still true, though as time went on, my feelings grew. I swallow. This was it. So much that it hurts to keep it inside. I place my hand over my chest, roses now being offered to Killua, who reaches out and takes them, eyes bright and wide, as if anxious what was to come. I love you, Killua. You're so beautiful and precious to me. I took it upon myself to protect you, no matter what the cost, without your permission. And I'm sorry. But I don't want to lose you. I just want you to be happy, to always smile. You deserve to, like you deserve everything. The tears escaped and started to roll unbidden down my cheeks, and I let them. Everything about you, I love. I wouldn't change you for anything. You're perfect. As perfect as anyone could get, and I'm in love with you. A span of silence greets my words, one where Killua stood there, frozen, small hands clasped around the bouquet, eyes piercing into mine. My heart sunk into the pit of my belly. I was expecting this, but it still hurt. Just as I was about to open my mouth to offer a stuttered apology and make hasty retreat so I can cry in my bedroom, Killua drops the bouquet and leaps at me. Flustered, I quickly caught him in my arms, his lips crashing into mine unexpectedly. They were soft. My eyes were wide in surprise as Killua presses himself into me, hardly giving me time to react as he kept the kiss going. Arms wrapping around my neck, it took me a moment to process this and realize that it was really happening. I was kissing Killua. Or rather, he was kissing me. It was better than I could ever dream of. I didn't notice how long we kissed, nor did I notice Krupka and Lario watching us from the window. All I noticed was Killua. How soft his lips were, how warm his body was, and how simply and exquisitely beautiful he was. After a moment, we pulled away, gasping for air. Killua smiles at me. Precious pale cheeks flushed from our kiss. I hardly dare to speak. Then he raises his hands and signs something that brings my heart from the pit of my stomach, where it dropped priorly, back to the confines of my chest. I love you too. And that brings us to the end of Flower Boy. Okay. But one thing, I love this so much. Dude, this, deadass. So, this is amazing. I hope you agree with me. The way, like, the words and, like, this doesn't sound like fan fiction writing. You know what I mean? It sounds so good. It's so, you know what I'm saying? I wish it was longer though. In my opinion, I feel like this fic drops a lot of things that they don't come back to. Like Gon's backstory or Killua's home life. And you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, you read enough, you know, Killua Gon fanfiction, or you just know enough about Hunter x Hunter, or, you know, in any fandom that has a lot of fanfiction, there's a lot of tropes that continue on, you know, and you know what to expect after you read enough. And I can assume a bunch of stuff and this, that, and the other. But if it was just, I understand this is literally just like, oh, this is them falling in love and it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's perfect. And I totally get that and I agree 1000%. I just wish it was more. I wish it was longer so I could, like, live it longer. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so good and amazing. And, like, amazing. So, I hope you enjoyed this super long, special big episode. And, you know, it's probably gonna, like, take me forever to edit this, and it's probably, you know, so, gee, all my blood, sweat, and tears went into, reading this. So, or editing, I'm sorry. All my blood, sweat, and tears went to editing this, causing my, iPad to break, and now I have to buy a new one, and so, long story short, I truly hope you enjoyed this big special episode. I know that Killua Gon is kind of off-brand for me, on my channel at least, but I still hope you enjoyed. So if you did, leave a like, leave a comment. I do recommendations, except if you're recommending me to do, to continue comic dubs that I've started, because apparently I guess I'm never gonna do those again. Anyways, that's, besides the point. Don't forget to drink water and love yourself, because I love you. I love you so much. Okay, I love you. Drink water. I love you. Okay, bye. He was wearing an oversized pasty yellow sweater. Another nod. Tug, tug. Tug, tug. Then I understood. Okay. He's gay, yep. We had sandwiches, crackers with cheese, and goose. It sent inward shudders throughout my yep. It sent inward shudders, my god. Killua nodded again, tugging my shirt and pointed towards his house. If you know sign language, just sign it to him. Do you know it or not? Sorry, cut that out. You will, I trust you. Killua tilts his head, and he raises his hands, signing that he could never hate me.